Hello, this is Nick from Lucifer.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview.
No problem.
Oh, awesome. Well, it's great to be able to talk to you and everything that's going on in the world of Lucifer right now, and including the brand new album Lucifer 3, which just came back out the 20th of March through Century Media. I love this album. I love what you guys have been able to continue to do since the creation of the band, and this just feels like a great natural progression of where the band is right now in 2020.
Well, thank you. I guess. I suppose so, yes.
With that in mind, I mean, what was it like to be able to create this album and to have it released during these uncertain times?
Well, two different things, obviously. The creation of it wasn't that much different than the one before. Johanna and me wrote the songs, and then we went into the studio. Same as the one before, we did it a little bit here and there. Everyone's pretty busy, and we have the luxury of, I have my own studio at our little property here, so that makes it pretty easy to go in when there actually is time and there's no clock ticking. And just hope for the best so you don't have to do the whole maintenance thing if something goes wrong, technically.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense, and yeah, I'm glad to see that you guys are in that situation where you are able to do it from your studio, and of course with the great instrumentation that you're able to do in and outside of Lucifer. I mean, it's great to see that you're able to adapt to those situations, be able to make that into a studio, and be able to work on it the way that you do.
Well, I think I got the studio around, when was that? It was shortly after we stopped playing together with my other band, the Helicopters, and I thought if there's one thing I know I always want to do would be to record music. But if all else fail and I have a studio, at least I can do that. So I put the last money we got into putting some gear together, and been building on that ever since, having no idea what the hell I'm doing. I'm just looking at pictures with things from the 60s that look cool, that have a lot of tubes and a lot of big knobs on them. That's kind of how I started.
Oh, that's so cool. And yeah, I mean, it's great to be able to have that kind of inspiration and be able to find something to use as inspiration and be able to make your own studio. And obviously with what you've been able to accomplish out of that studio, you've been able to build up the equipment and of course get the experience of being able to record in that studio and be able to make better and better music out of that studio.
Yeah, I do really enjoy it because I know how it's supposed to sound in my head, so what I'm learning is just to try to get that, from my head, through the fingers and then out, and so it comes out of the speaker sounding like I want it to sound. And it takes time, but I'm getting closer.
With that in mind, obviously with, it's always going to be a trial and error when it comes to working in your own studio, always being able to perfect your sound. There's so many variables that go into it. When you were working on this particular album with Lucifer 3, what was there anything that you had to change in the studio or anything, or was that a smooth process when it came to your parts?
Well, I love recording, but I think I like writing songs more than that. So sometimes you write a song, you make a rough demo of it, which I don't do in the studio because then it will sound too good. So I always make a pretty rough, very rough demo in GarageBand, so that's not in the studio. So when I'm done with that, then I actually have to go into the studio and make it sound a lot better. That's sometimes just frustrating, and I don't know. For me, I'm very happy if I make it in 3 takes, because I know I'm not gonna play better the more takes I spend on it. They're not all 1 takes on the album. I'm afraid to say, but 3rd takes maybe.
You know that's quite all right. I mean, there's some tricky moments on this album, and I can completely understand why that would be the case. And you know, the fact that you are able to do it in 3 takes when there's some musicians that spend like weeks upon months trying to be able to get one solid take to be able to use on an album and being able to cut and paste. And there's so many different ways to go about it. But I love the fact that you're taking that 3 takes or less approach to be able to put out a great quality recording behind it, because sometimes, like you said, it's like if you max out at 3, I mean, sometimes you're not going to be able to get a better performance than that.
I mean, you can look at it in many different ways, I suppose. I mean, if like you said, if we start comparing to the bands who actually do what you said, they spend months and whatever, maybe those guys actually sell records. so who knows who's right or wrong there, But I do most of the music I like comes from, the bulk of it, I would say, is from the 60s and the 70s. And I know that they weren't spending a lot of time in the studio because they had to tour all the time. And that sounds perfect to me. I don't want it to be better than that. And also, if the song is not good enough, then it really doesn't matter if you try to move around kick drums here and there, or try to sequence guitars. It's not going to make the song better.
Oh, it's so true, and I love that approach again. Because just like you said, in the 60s and 70s, I mean, they didn't have the auto-tune, they didn't have Pro Tools, they didn't have drum samples. Obviously, might have been some reamping and stuff like that, but maybe at most. But it had to be those real raw takes that they had to do, make the songs as enjoyable as they could, and then go back out and tour, because you want to be able to go out there and perform the songs live and be able to bring people in. I mean, that's the biggest part about it, and that's what I do love about this album, is it does have that real approach to it. I mean, it doesn't sound like it was something that was just created by one person and then used a whole bunch of digital instruments. I mean, it sounds like everyone is performing, and it has that great performance behind it.
Oh, thank you. Then we did something right, if you say that. That's nice. Thank you for saying that.
Oh, no problem at all. So, with that in mind, and again, the very strange times that we're living in right now, I mean, what's it like to think about the album being out for almost a couple months now?
Well, it was weird when we got close to the release date. I mean, I think it was kind of like the week before when it really hit the fan, wasn't it? Where airports started to close down, and that was just a week before the album release. And I remember our agent here in Europe, who books the shows, he was like, "You have to postpone the release." Like, oh, come on, it's only 2 weeks before the album's out. You can't do that. I mean, we said no. We would rather do it, and when things like this happening, there's no blueprint for how to go about things, I guess. But obviously, yes, you tour and you promote the album, and now you can't, so maybe that'll suffer a bit. But the good thing about it is that it seems that the people who did buy the album or have bought the album actually had time to listen to it, and that's one upside.
Oh yeah, that's totally how I feel about this situation too, and I'm so happy that the album did not get postponed for that reason, because I mean, there's so many people at home right now, and just like you said, there's no blueprint for knowing what to do. I mean, especially when it comes into music, knowing what to do going forward, or just people in general knowing what to do in these times. And when you are stuck at home and you're able to enjoy an album like this, you're able to actually sit down and enjoy it rather than just hearing the singles and skipping all the other songs. I think you're actually able to appreciate a full album now because you're able to take that time to do it.
Yeah, at least our album came out before people started going nuts in lockdown, So maybe today, to release an album today would be worse. Who knows, But also, if, let's say, we postponed it, for how long? I mean, that doesn't make any sense either. So I guess, let's postpone it for 2 months. Well, that wouldn't have helped, would it?
Yeah, and it could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 months, it could be 2 years for all we know. I mean, there's so many variables that's going on in the world right now, and yeah, the physical sales are obviously going to be a bit less that's going on there, but thankfully, due to digital sales and streaming and everything, people are able to enjoy the album, and again, just being able to take the time and enjoy the music that they might not have been able to spend the time to be able to appreciate before.
Yeah, I mean, well, I I hope that is a little bit of the case. That's the upside of it. And then we'll just have to see what happens. It's going to be awesome to finally get to tour. But then again, then every band will start touring at the same time. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Oh yeah, I can just imagine all musicians, unless they don't like the tour, are just like really having that itch right now, just wanting to be able to go out there and be able to play live again. I mean, obviously financial reasons, but just the joy that comes out of playing live shows, being able to show off a new album, being able to switch up the set list, and playing in front of fans again.
I know. I can't wait.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and again, that's another thing that I do love about the album is because it fits so well with the previous material that I could just imagine in that live setting, these songs are going to sound incredible when you get the chance to be able to play them live.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the coolest thing when you have a new album, that you can play new songs, Because we did play for quite a bit since the last album, and I'm not saying I'm getting tired of the songs, but it's good to mix it up a little bit. It totally is.
Oh, absolutely, and yeah, I mean, with everything that you got going on in and out of Lucifer, and of course, with Lucifer, I mean, when you're able to go out there and tour, and you have 9 more songs to be able to see if they would work in that live setting or not. I mean, that's going to make the set list feel so much more fresher and be able to enjoy even the previous songs more because you're switching things around.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's always. I mean, the more albums you have, it gets trickier to do a set list, but it's also more fun to have, maybe different set lists every night. That's always cool.
Oh, for sure. And another thing that's really cool about this album that I really appreciate, and I can't wait to see it in the physical form, is the album cover this time around. I just really love the aesthetics that's going on with it. How did that come together?
Well, I think, how did we start talking about that? Johanna and me, we love old movie posters from the 70s, and we were talking about that, how that would be cool. And I have this book. I have many. I have many. It sounds like I have one book. I have this, it's called British movie posters from back in the day and forward. And all these guys who did amazing artwork for movie posters, they're more or less dead. But there was one guy coming up in the early 80s who's still doing it. His name is Graham Humphreys, and Johanna said we should ask him. I was like, fuck, he doesn't want to do a metal album, But Johanna got in touch with him on Facebook, or what's the other one, Instagram, and he said, sure, I can do that. And it wasn't cheap, but he wasn't as expensive as I thought he'd be. So we were over the moon. I think it's so awesome that we got this guy to actually paint it, and it's not done in Photoshop. It's an actual painting. We're still asking him if we can buy the actual painting, but he seemed a little reluctant.
I can understand why that would be the case sometimes, but just like with the final product, from what I see, it looks incredible, and being able to pick up the vinyl version of that, I mean, just being able to see that full-fledged vinyl album cover, I mean, that's gonna totally be a trip back to like those 70s and 80s horror-filled times. It really fits the aesthetic.
Well, Johanna had this idea that we were gonna stand around an old Rolls Royce, kind of like a homage to the Noise the Cult live album, On Your Feet or On Your Knees, kind of. So there's a little nod to them there, as the music is too, I suppose. But no, I think it turned out really cool, and he did a really good job.
Oh, for sure. And, again, with everything that's going on right now, and, obviously being able to release this album almost a couple months ago now, and so many of us are at home right now just waiting for all of this to blow over. How have you been spending your time with all this?
Well, the thing is, we live outside of Stockholm, looking out to the sea. It's kind of out in the sticks, really. So where we're at, there's absolutely no difference. and when we're not touring, we like to stay at home. because when you're touring, you see all the bars and the pubs, and you have everything. So when you get home, we kind of just stay here and write music and shuffle around in the garden or whatever, listen to music. So the good thing, again, there must be an upside. And the upside here is that since this whole crisis broke out, I've been writing even more songs than I used to. So that's the good thing about it.
Oh yeah, and the fact that you do have that home studio and it sounds like absolutely gorgeous landscape that you're able to look upon there in Sweden. I mean, that just seems like it's a perfect setting to be in during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. If I would live in a small apartment in the city, I would go nuts. But here, I don't. It's actually it feels like this is the best place to be right now. I mean, the only thing. I mean, obviously, people are dying and people are really sick, and that's horrible and everything. And apart from that, there's also the financial bit, which will probably hit us after the summer. But other than that, I'm just at the moment happy to just ride this thing out at home and make use of the time. That's how I have to look at it. I'm not gonna see it any worse than that if I don't have to.
Oh yeah. I mean, you got to be able to keep some kind of sanity during these times. And if you just think of the negative, you just think about the oncoming things that might possibly happen. I mean, it's just gonna hurt you so much mentally, and it's not gonna make you want to do things physically. And there's so much that could happen. And I'm just so happy that you are taking that time to be able to go outside and appreciate the landscape that you're at. Go out in the garden, and of course, being able to write new music. I mean, being able to take advantage of that. I mean, I'm glad that you are doing that.
Yeah, that feels like a luxury in these times. It really does.
Oh, for sure. So, with that in mind, I mean, obviously with continuing to build up on the studio and being able to write songs, I mean, what is that like for you? I mean, with you being able to play so many different kinds of instruments and loving so many different styles of music, I mean, what's that like for you nowadays to be able to write riffs? I mean, whether it's for a particular band or project or just on your own?
I don't know. I think it's kind of the same as it's always been. I don't know. It's kind of what I do. I don't know. I mean, I think I would feel like shit if I didn't do it. I just have to do it. And, I can only hope that some of it sounds okay, Yeah, I don't know. I don't really think about it that much. I still get excited about music. I mean, I don't buy so much new music, but for me, it's new. It's old, but new for me. So I listen to stuff I've never heard before all the time, and that keeps me inspired, I guess. And and then you can have moments here and there where there's not much coming to you, but that's usually over in a day.
Oh yeah, I can totally see that happening too. I mean, sometimes the inspiration's there, sometimes the inspiration's not there, and you just got to take a little bit of break. Sometimes just within just a day, and just being able to rest up your mind. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you are going back and checking out music of the past, being able to keep that creativity, and I can just imagine with the riffs and the songs and the ideas that you're coming with. I mean, when you got like an endless well of music for inspiration that you can go back and look to, especially with stuff that you haven't discovered yet, I imagine that it's got to open up your mind and want to be able to try out some new things.
Well, I'm a slow learner with everything. It takes me time to, but when when I do get into some music I've never heard before, then I usually get totally into it. Obsessive, if you will, but that's I think I've always been like that, but it works for me, I think.
So with that in mind, I mean, obviously with being able to go back and start to appreciate and then start to obsess over it, what are some recent bands that you've discovered that has been happening to that happening for you like that?
Well, I'm kind of into what I call bargain bin music. It's a friend of mine who produced some of the Helicopters albums. He kind of turned me on to that you can, check out the bargain bins and find, maybe they're not $1 anymore, but okay, $2, and just buy stuff that, it doesn't really matter if it's shit, if it's that cheap. And sometimes you find something that you wouldn't have heard before. because nobody talks about it. I've been doing that a lot, and you can also do that on like streaming services, like Spotify or whatever. You can find, if you know one bargain bin band, then you can also check out, the whatever it's called, fans also like or whatever. So there's stuff to find out. One of the better ones in this, homemade genre of mine would be a band they're from America. I have no idea where they're from. They're called Art for Dodger, and they made 4 albums between 75 and 80, I think. 75 and 80. And that's pretty fucking awesome. It's like kind of like power pop with Rod Stewart on vocals, almost. It's really good, but they were a huge failure, of course. Perhaps at a regional thing, who knows? I don't even know where they're from. That would be the tip of the day. Always return to them. They're really good. They have really good songs.
Yeah, and again, I love that. I love being able to do that myself, and with what I do for a living, I'm able to discover new music when it gets sent to me or I check it out on my own. But also just being able to go back and try to look for music that I haven't heard before, and just being able to discover gems like that. And when you are able to find a gem like that, especially when it's a genre that you do appreciate, when you're able to discover something like that, and you're able to check out 4 albums that you never discovered before from a band you haven't heard of before, and able to get that appreciation behind it, that's so cool to see that.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, there are numerous examples that there actually are gems there. So that means that, there is no justice in rock and roll. So sometimes it's not because the bands were bad. It's because bad timing, bad luck, whatever the reasons are. But sometimes there are bands out there, or were bands out there, that never got the attention they did deserve. So it's out there for the taking. And it doesn't cost you anything. You just have to dig a little.
Oh, exactly. And yeah, again, it really does prove that the music with the most notoriety and the most well-known music in a particular genre isn't always the best. But when you are into that kind of genre, or want to discover something about that genre, and you do that deep diving, and you discover that there were bands that did get that injustice, that should have been way bigger and way more well-known, and still hopefully being able to continue on today making great music, and whatever the case is with that. And again, that's the great thing about like the digital sources and things like that, is it doesn't even have to cost anything now to be able to appreciate, being able to discover music from the past that you might have missed out on, and be able to have that appreciation again.
Yeah, exactly. But I also want to point out that there are also reasons why some of their main bands are the main bands. I mean, Deep Purple are better than Blood Rock. I mean, I love Blood Rock, but of course Deep Purple is bigger because they were better.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously it does go both ways, but again, when you can discover a band that you haven't heard of before, and just being able to go back and appreciate that genre, it's always a great feeling. And I mean, there's so many different paths that you can take with that too. Like if you discover a band like this and it has this kind of influence, you can try to look for another band that has like part of that influence, and be able to check out all those different routes, and be able to appreciate other styles of music that comes from it, just discovering one band.
Yeah, exactly. It's I really do enjoy doing that.
Oh, that's so cool. And yeah, again, with the amazing resume that you have, and so many styles that you've been a part of, I mean, it's great to see that you still do have that appreciation after all this time.
Well, I don't think I would continue doing this if I didn't. I think jaded is probably the last thing I would ever be. Jaded and bored. It's never gonna happen.
Oh yeah, I mean, once that starts to happen, I mean, there's no reason to continue on with music. I mean, unless the money is just that good and you just see no other way out of it. But when you want to be able to have that integrity behind it, and you do have that love and passion for music, and you are someone like in your situation where you are able to make all this great music from home, and being able to try out the things that you want to try, as long as that inspiration and creativity is there, and you're able to continue on with it, I'm from the fan base, and myself included, I'm so thankful that you do continue to do that to this day.
Yeah, I do feel somewhat blessed that I can. Not that I'm religious, but yeah, it does feel like a luxury. It really does.
Oh, I can imagine so, and that's how I feel being able to talk to you as well. And I appreciate you taking this time to be able to talk to me about everything that's going on in your world right now. And of course, the brand new album from Lucifer available now through Century Media, and hopefully everything getting back to the way it's supposed to be with live shows and being able to continue writing new music and getting that released on labels and going out and doing summer festival circuits and everything that's going on with that. I mean, be it Lucifer, be it everything else that you got coming up in the future, or any new ideas that might happen while you're stuck in quarantine. I appreciate you taking the time to be able to talk to me about all of it.
Oh, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, and you as well. Before we're done, is there anything else you'd like to mention that I hadn't brought up yet?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's pretty obvious since we talked that I am working on stuff. So I would think that Lucifer 4 is probably not going to take too long before that gets released.
Oh.
Going back to the good old days when bands released two studio albums a year, at least. Those were the days.